Thank you. I'm doing this on my phone. Can you, Jill Nixon, can you scroll down or scroll up rather, pardon me. And I'll do the land acknowledgement statement. So this is the Joint Behavioral Health Committee and Law and Justice Services Committee meeting here this morning at 11:30. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we were gathered on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lummi, Nooksack, Samish, and Semiahmoo people who have cared for and tended this land since time immemorial. Truth and acknowledgement are critical to building mutual respect and connection across all barriers of heritage and difference. We begin this effort to acknowledge what has been buried by honoring the truth. We pay respect to their elders, past and present. Please take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together here today. And please join us in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. And so I'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. And there we go. All right. And so the first item, Raylene, can you go ahead and kick us off there?
So the initial thought was to kind of have a brief discussion and bring in more experts as we go on what's available and what's not available for juvenile detention and behavioral health services. I did speak with Susan Johnson with Peace Health CQ unit, and she advised that there isn't really a current space for juveniles. They do accept them, but they don't have a special unit, and there were a lot of gaps in the system, so that was a concern. Unfortunately, it doesn't appear she's going to be able to join us today, but maybe another meeting. So there's been discussion that has been brought up before about the need to make sure there's more help. Arlene had some information that she received from Erica Crate on funding, and I'm going to let Arlene discuss some of that. That's hopeful and in the works for juveniles, and then Perry might be able to also give us some more information on what he knows is available for juveniles.
Yes, Dr. Crate has a counseling center called Touchstone in Blaine, and I have worked as a supervisor there and still do. She has plans to create a crisis center for juveniles. So far, there has been funding for a property, and grants are being applied to for operation and set up. It will start on a very small level and expand as possible. And we don't have a lot of details yet, but it's excellent that a unit is being planned and created.
Thank you, Arlene. Perry, did you have more information on that unit? I believe you had mentioned a little bit about it earlier in another meeting.
Yeah, Perry Mowry, Response Systems Division Supervisor. I do have a little bit of information. I've just been communicating with Dr. Crate in this regard. She applied for the Department of Commerce grant, and if I don't know that I'm accurate here, but I believe that it was in the amount of $90,000. That is a capital funding, and so is related to equipment and buildings and et cetera, as you know. During the discussion that I had with Dr. Crate, who, by the way, is also a Behavioral Health Advisory Committee member now, a new BAC member, so just FYI, she indicated that the Touchstone was in the process of applying for certification to provide substance use disorder services through Department of Health. That is the sort of standard process with the healthcare authority. And I believe that she had been granted that certification fairly recently as well. So the discussion around crisis stabilization services for youth, if I understood her correctly, so this may not be accurate, was that her intent was to initiate using recliner chairs, kind of a recliner chair model, and starting out with 3 chairs, if I understand the information correctly. And it was oriented specifically towards youth. Their certification for SUD services at Touchstone, to my knowledge, is for both adult and youth outpatient services, and then, of course, the crisis stabilization services. If there is a recliner model, excuse me, that is linked to the 23-hour services orientation, and so it still remains as an outpatient setting, because that magic number is 24 hours for an inpatient setting. A little more challenge as far as certification and requirements and et cetera of that. So I believe that the design is the 23-hour service, and that's about the length of the information that I know at this point. I am setting up a tour of the Ann Deacon Center for Hope with Dr. Crate here in the next couple of weeks. She was just interested in, connecting and getting information, et cetera. So that's the information that I know.
Excellent. Thank you, Perry. Arlene?
Yes, one of the things she mentioned was that in the current situation, young people who are suicidal are being held in classrooms, just so that they're in a safe spot. And to hear that is, amazing and not good, of course, but that's the situation we are in. We have many young people who are very depressed and suicidal, and we need to take care of them.
Arlene, is that while they're in a school setting that you mentioned this classroom?
Yes.
And you said
I
that,
don't know about, the later hours. I have no idea about that, but just
Right.
the thought of they have to do something.
Mike, did you have any other input on that?
I did. It was more questions, right? Because I think this is what this is going to do today, is probably spark a lot. And I see Perry on the phone, so I want to give him a minute. I was curious about the recliner model briefly. This is the first that I've heard of that. I have become, basically through Perry and other folks of the county, become aware of the 23 hours. So I think myself, I get that 23-hour model. Perry, I see you're off the phone now. I wonder if you have any more, just at least a little bit, to give me some context, because it's sounding like a place where maybe families might be able to take a teen who is struggling in a crisis situation. I know frequently they go to Peace Health and they go to the emergency department like everybody else, and they have to sit and wait to see a social worker, and then their options are kind of tough, right? I mean, you can't really go to CQ, you look for voluntary units. So I think we know a little bit of the crux of more of the problem than the solution. So Perry, I wonder if you have any tidbits more about the recliner model. Is that like opposed to beds? And then the other thing I guess I was curious about is, what is the intended, like, who would it serve? Is this like all young adults in Whatcom County would be able to avail themselves of this? And I didn't know, Perry, if you knew that. I know it's not your program, but if you knew more about the scope.
Sure. So I can talk a little bit about it, and I'm using I think that folks may be aware, and I don't have my information up right at this moment. Legislation this year went through to establish 23-hour crisis relief centers, as the term that's being used. And it is an outpatient setting, again, as I'd mentioned, because of the 23 hours. It is not limited to 16, which is the IMD rule, if folks are aware, that you can't have inpatient facility larger than 16 because Medicaid won't pay for that. So that's been, a challenge, but that 16 number does not apply to outpatient settings, which again, the crisis relief centers are a model of. So when I was using that terminology, a recliner model, I'm using that sort of loosely. And again, that's just my understanding at this point. That is something that is a descriptor of the 23-hour crisis relief centers. But I don't know that that's necessarily the model that Touchstone is actually using. So I just wanted to make sure that I was being clear about that, because I do have limited information on it. But if that is the model, the intent is for the individual to receive immediate services, for the individual to be able to remain there for 23 hours and 59 minutes is the limitation, and then typically be, if there is additional needs and services that are necessary, to be referred from that point. I don't have information just in terms of specifically the Touchstone program and services that are going to be there, but I certainly can provide to Jill some of the basic information that I have on the 23-hour crisis relief centers and that legislation that passed this year, fairly significant because we hadn't had those kinds of services. So if I shift to that and sort of set aside, if you will, Touchstone for a moment, so I don't want to confuse folks, that some of the really key factors in the 23-hour crisis relief center components is there's a no refusal policy as long as there is space available in terms of the recliners. Again, I'll send this information out to folks and they can take a look at this. The facilities also have to have the ability to address primary health care issues, at least basic primary health care issues. So I suspect that, possibly an EMT or paramedic would be a part of that facility. They have to have prescriber ability and nurse on staff as well. So again, I'm describing the 23-hour crisis relief centers, not Touchstone, because I suspect that possibly Dr. Creit is designing it as a 23-hour short stay for crisis stabilization for youth specifically. And to my knowledge, she has not limited that to anything other than Whatcom County, but I don't want to speak, of course, on her behalf. So I hope I shared the information that you were seeking there, Mike. Let me know.
Perry, just quick follow-up, while we were looking a little bit, I looked at Google, right, which we all do, and looked a little bit at recliner model, and one of the examples I found was through University of Iowa created a crisis stabilization unit, and it looks like they're trying to create almost a communal environment that's relaxing and calming, and it's oriented around the person being made comfortable in a recliner chair as opposed to separated off space, and then they meet with care providers. And they're basically having a conversation and then make a plan, essentially, kind of a crisis plan, so to speak. So it's both a model and it's actually a physical item, but it sounds like what you're saying is not dissimilar to that. They may follow some tenets of that, but it looks like kind of treating people in common, so to speak. Would you say that's inaccurate?
I would say that is accurate. Again, I was hoping when I was involved in the tour at the Crisis Stabilization Center with Dr. Creit to get a little bit more information about, her design and what her thoughts are in that regard. There is also a 23-hour crisis relief center being established in King County. It is part of a larger building, is the way that I'll say it, that has multiple different kinds of services. I do have some information about that. We've been in communication with them just in interest of their development of the 23-hour crisis relief center and the other services that they were providing. I believe that the facility is actually located, I want to say, in Kent, Washington. Let's see, Connections is a national company that actually provides the services in some of these 23-hour crisis relief centers that are in other states at this point. And they are actually providing services in a couple of them in Arizona. So we've been in communication with them, some just about their model and their approach. And there's only been one meeting so far, but trying to get a sense of, just challenges that they may have run into, or would they design something differently to understand more about implementation of a 23-hour crisis release center in Whatcom County.
Perry, as always, thank you. Very, very helpful.
Sure,
Thank
I'll send that information to Jill so that she can distribute it to folks.
Greatly appreciated. This is near and dear to my heart. I'm always concerned about the youth. I've had friends and family members that have struggled with finding places for their children. The 16 to 25-year-old age seems to be the most tendencies towards criminogenic behavior. A lot of it is stemmed from mental health or issues at home. And sometimes the parents don't feel like they have a place to send their kids. Family members that I've had have had to send their 12-year-old daughters to help down in Bellevue. Thankfully, there was enough support and finances to be able to go back and forth as needed, but she was there for quite some time. I also know of an acquaintance here that I've worked with that had his daughter that had to go down to Children's to seek help because there was going to be a lengthy stay. And his response to me was, if there wasn't, if I didn't have the job I had, if I didn't have the finances, I don't know what I would have done. I don't know how I would have helped my daughter, because I don't think I would have been able to go back and forth to Seattle to get the care. I know when we spoke with Ann Deacon before, she said there's a lot of red tape, there's a lot of expenses. But if we want to keep the teenagers and the young adults out of jail, we kind of got to look to see what we can do to break the barriers and the red tape, and see what else we can bring into the county. I think the fact that Dr. Crate is working on this and moving forward is huge. I want to hear from others to see what we could do. I think Dave Reynolds might be able to talk to us about the Juvenile Detention Center at another meeting. And maybe we can bring Erica Crate in to talk more about this. I see Arlene's hand up. I also see Jill, if you can just let me know, there's a hand raised in the conference room. I'm assuming that's public and that we would let them speak at the end of the meeting, but I wanted to confirm that I'm not missing something.
Thank you, Raylene. Yes, I can't quite see myself. Who's
Peter Fraser. I'm on the behavioral.
Okay, great. Yeah, Peter Fraser is a member of the Behavioral Health Committee.
Oh, okay. Well, excellent. Then he's had his hand up for quite some time. So please go ahead, Peter.
I have a few things. One is, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to have to leave at noon for another meeting, but I'm appreciative of what I've heard so far. I may have missed this, but what's the connection between the 23-hour crisis facility you were just talking about, Perry, and the 23-hour crisis center that we just received $9 million for? These are completely and utterly separate. Is that right? One for adults, one for juveniles?
Yes.
Is that correct? Okay. And then I assume those two populations cannot be mixed. So we definitely need two different facilities. Is that correct? Okay.
That's correct.
And then Arlene, I had not heard about suicidal children being held in classrooms in the Bellingham Public Schools. And where do I find out more?
Well, I heard this about Blaine, so
it's just my ears pricked up, and
yeah, well, they should.
But yeah, I would very much like to know more.
Yeah.
So maybe we can talk later.
What's important about this model to me, from my perspective, is that there are no barriers and no refusals. We have nothing like that, nothing. And And that there is, if there are waits, it's within hours. So every counseling system has waits, and really long ones too. So not getting emergency care in an emergency manner is absolutely crucial for our community.
Mike?
So as to what Raylene said, while the hospital ED takes all comers and there's no barriers, the barrier is exactly what Arlene said. The wait can be long. And just sitting in the emergency department waiting room with all hosts of different types of emergencies, it's not a really conducive waiting space. So just from my own personal observations, it was really challenging for families who've come there with kind of at the end of their rope and seeking more time from a clinician than they can get, seeking a calmer environment than is present in an emergency department waiting room. So, even though I've only heard the brief cursory pieces of this plan, I just want to wholeheartedly say more intrigued, would love to know more, and it's a really needed service. I mean, families, when they realized, okay, so your kids doesn't need to be detained, but they really need emergent care and they need more time than the social worker at the hospital can give. Not that that person doesn't have the skills, it's not the model, right? They have to see 10 other people who are in line. And so to Arlene's point, that they need urgent care, but a little bit longer. And maybe it's not over 23 hours. Maybe that is enough time, but it needs to be more than the hour that the social worker might be able to give them. So even though the emergency department takes all comers, I think it just doesn't serve this population well of young adults in crisis, and being in such a mixed population environment with mixed maladies is really difficult. My hope would be that it is, like Arlene says, it's all comers, and that it can kind of provide a little bit longer time to create a crisis plan and to identify some resources and some next steps. I know that providers a lot of times feel really stuck when you're looking at, oh, well, children's, and it's like hours away. And if your kid were to get accepted in a voluntary program, because most of them were voluntary, how would families even arrange that trip? And Arlene mentioned about the place in Bellevue. I too had somebody who went down and was lucky enough to get their child in. It was very instructive. Literally, they got an Airbnb for like months and they went down. So who can do that? And I guess I'm curious, one, what would next steps be? And then two, what, if any, support might the task force lend? One of my thoughts here, Raylene and Arlene, is how this, the SIM really doesn't take into account young adults very well. And I think what you all are bringing to this conversation is one that Dan and I have had too. Do we need to keep this artificial boundary that says that the task force doesn't deal with things youth? And I think we're going headlong into it. But I just wanted to raise that question because the observation had been made before that the task force doesn't deal with things youth. And as a co-chair of the subcommittee, Dan and I didn't 100% agree with that.
Thank you, Mike. Arlene, one quick moment. I saw Heather Flaherty's hand up. She did put it down, but I wanted to give her a chance if she still wants to speak.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
I have ideas and questions. I love that we're talking about juveniles, especially because if we want to actually prevent incarceration, you all know that's the area to target. I think it would be awesome to know more about the success our county has seen with reducing juvenile incarceration. We've all heard that those detention numbers are way down. And so what is working well, and can we build on that? I heard an incredible young woman, I think she just graduated from Seaholm High School, Sophia. She ran teen court or was involved in teen court. That would be a really interesting presentation here as well. How is teen court going, and where are the successes we can build on? And I also kind of wonder about if there might be an opportunity to maybe someday have a joint meeting with the Children's Task Force and talk about kind of the overlapping opportunities there too with prevention. And I'll add that with Chuck Annette, with the Health Foundation, we've been going across the county to schools for the last couple of years and talking with teachers about what they're seeing with youth. And there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of anxiety and depression. We're in the valley of the pandemic. We're not healed yet. And I just think the reality is there will never be enough treatment or counselors. And so we've been talking about what are the community care solutions. And we'd be glad to share what we've been learning from teachers at any time with this committee too, and the ideas that are coming up with how we help schools. And I'll also add that Joe Fuller with the health department is an exceptional resource on the prevention side with kids and all of the youth prevention coalitions. So if we went on a learning agenda, there's a whole bunch of ideas for what would be interesting to hear and learn about.
Thank you, Heather. I see Arlene and then Sat Paul.
Yes, I just wanted to answer Mike's question, which was that how can we support this project? And I can tell you that a letter of recommendation from this organization would be extremely helpful in her pursuing grants. So if the group would be, willing to participate in something like that, it could be very helpful.
I like that idea, Arlene. Thank you. Sat Paul and then Dan Hamill.
Yeah, I just wanted to add about the what is working schools. I remember when my kids were in high school, they started the teen court, and I was with them for 7 years and volunteered and worked with Judge Chuck Schneider. And I know the juvie rates at that time in the jail were like 50 or more. And now it is like empty, or sometimes we have 1 or 2, which is incredible improvement. And Whatcom County is investing $150,000 to, I think, except Bellingham, every school district. We give an annual sport for call it no to drugs or teen court, all these programs in different schools. I think that impact is incredible. And I think that working with the child task force is a great idea. I think and in future they can actually provide some program assistance to all the school districts from that program. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan Hamill, Sheriff Elfo, and then Maya.
Yeah, I just wanted to address one of Heather's points about teen court. At the last, I think it was the last behavioral health committee meeting, we actually had a presentation by Bonnie Schultz Lorenzen, who heads up the teen court at Northwest Youth Services. So, I mean, absolutely, this juvenile and youth services have been on the radar screen for the task force, and in particular with the behavioral health subcommittee for years. We've been looking upstream. That was one of the reasons I joined Heather. I think it was back in 2018 in Denver at the Children's Funding Summit to try to figure out how we can work on upstream prevention models. So that work is definitely embraced by the task force and by this committee. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Sheriff Elfo?
Yeah, I just want to add, the doctor in Blaine, she had requested letters from law enforcement and later commented or sent a thank you that they were instrumental in helping get the grant. And they're also opening another center in Everson as well.
Thank you, Sheriff Elfo. Maya?
Thanks. Right, today there are 10 kids in juvenile detention, just for a current update. I also heard the youth named Sophia speak at the listening program and was really inspired by what she had to say. And based on that, I met with Northwest Youth Services and have organized a meeting on July 13th with Northwest Youth Services, some professors at Western Washington University, and Eric Sigmar has agreed to show up. And I don't know, maybe Eric Ritchie will as well, to discuss the possibility of creating maybe a youthful adult offender court that is peer-based, like the teen court program. So it's very, I mean, it was literally just an idea and I asked these folks to meet. Everyone seems interested. So any support for that would be appreciated. And we're gonna meet for the first time on the 13th. So I love the innovative ideas that are coming and we just need to follow up on them. Thanks. I have to leave. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you, Maya. Appreciate it. Eric Ritchie, a question for you. At a future meeting, would you be able to get somebody from the juvenile prosecutors area to come and give us kind of how many cases are sitting on a desk that need to be reviewed, that are waiting, or how far are any delays, if there's not any delays? You know, how many juveniles is coming across the prosecutor's desk on a regular basis?
Sure. Yeah, we can get that done.
Okay. And then just give me an idea of how much time you need before we schedule you to speak on that on a meeting. Appreciate that. Or somebody from your office that you.
Yeah, I
select.
mean, if you're looking for stats, it'd take a minute. If you're looking for more information, it'd take longer. I'm not exactly sure what you're interested in.
I think I'd like statistics, but I'd also like to know what we could do to assist the prosecutor's office in making sure juveniles aren't waiting in a holding pattern if that is a problem. And if it's not a problem, then great, but I think starting with statistics is a great place to go. Is there any other hands up or thoughts on this topic at this time? Excellent. I think we had a very good discussion on this and something to move forward for. I'd like to talk to Dave Reynolds about juvenile detention and the needs from there, see if we can get statistics from the prosecutor's office. That would be great. If we can look and talk to the child task force, bring in Erica Crate, and I will reach out again to Susan Johnson with the IQ, is it the IQ unit, it's CQ unit. I can't say it right. Thank you. For maybe a possible follow-up in another meeting on the restrictions and the gaps that they see at Peace Health, because I would like to get the perspective from the hospital as well. And then anything else that anybody else brings up, I love Maya's idea that we can explore further on this topic. And I think as I'm looking for my agenda, we're going on to the special legislative session in reference to the Blake decisions. And I didn't know, Mike or Dan, if you wanted to kick that off, or if we wanted to turn it over to Sheriff Alfo to give his input.
Real quick, Raylene, Jill had her hand up and I didn't know if it was material to the thing that we were just talking about.
Thank you, Mike. I just wanted to clarify if this is an item that will need to be held to the next agenda for the joint group in September, or if you're wanting it to schedule it on your individual July meeting agendas.
Thoughts?
I think we should move it to the joint meeting.
Thank you.
Thanks, I approve. Okay, and moving forward, where are we at, Dan and Mike?
Jill Nixon, can you put the agenda back up on the screen? And then move it down to that next item. Okay. So this is on 5536. This is I believe a Senate bill on controlled substances possession and treatment. I think the overview, it's in the packet, there's a 9-page document in the packet that goes over not only what the charges would be, but also what the investments will be in treatment. There's a good breakdown of services that will be funded. And so we're hoping today to have a discussion on what that looks like in light of basically a new law that supersedes anything that municipalities have done and makes possession a misdemeanor. It's a gross misdemeanor. And it'd be helpful to have someone from legal or law enforcement to to describe what the difference is between a misdemeanor and a gross misdemeanor. So maybe we can start there and then kick off the discussion.
I think it would be excellent if we could go back to Prosecutor Ritchie, because he's got our attorney knowledge here. Otherwise, I can do a brief description. Eric, are you available? There he is.
Yeah, so the question is the difference between a misdemeanor and a gross misdemeanor, I think. The difference is just amount of days that a person might serve in jail. Misdemeanor is 90 days and a gross misdemeanor is 364 days. That's the general difference. I think there's some probation that could go along with a gross misdemeanor as well. And I think it'd be up to 2 years for this. I don't have any more expertise on this particular bill. I'm wondering if Bill Alpha might have more information to provide.
Thank you. Sheriff Alpha?
Yeah, as with the Blake decision, that's where the legislature reversed a previous Supreme Court decision that required an intent or knowledge requirement to convict someone of a drug possession, and the legislature quickly tried what they called a temporary fix, and they added the word knowingly, which solved the problem. But then they went ahead and also changed the classification for most controlled substances from felonies to simple misdemeanors, and imposed a requirement that the person first be referred to treatment on 2 occasions prior to bringing charges. But they didn't provide a way to check who or where or how treatment was provided, so it was very unworkable. They tried to fix it in the regular session of the legislature and weren't able to do so. So they went into special session. I followed that pretty closely. So what they ended up doing was changing the possession laws to it's a gross misdemeanor, and eliminated the requirement for referrals, but strongly encouraged it. And that's just the 2-second summary of the history where we're at now. But from practical aspects, we're not able to book people in jail for misdemeanors or gross misdemeanors unless they involve DUI or they involve domestic violence. So we still have an impediment to getting people off the street and perhaps even saving their lives by doing so. And I'm not sure what impact this will have on other aspects of the criminal justice system, such as the drug court. The cases now won't be, and Eric, you could step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I would presume now that they're gross misdemeanors, what previously came to your office will be going to the municipalities, except for those that are referred by the sheriff and state patrol into district court.
Yeah, so that's a great question, Bill. They will go to the county prosecutor until the cities actually codify the statutes, and I don't know. I mean, they may or they may not. I was having some talks with the chief of police about that yesterday. I'm hopeful that the Bellingham and the other small cities will go ahead and codify that. Otherwise, we'll be handling those in our district court.
I see Seattle Council did not codify it.
Right. That's what the chief told me yesterday.
So Blaine codified yesterday at council. It'll be interesting to see how that impacts the court. People still know that they're not going to be incarcerated because of the jail situation. So there's an increase of warrants that we're already seeing. I'm sure that Jake Webush and Bruce will be watching closely on the impacts of probation, because that's probably going to be used more heavily for stipulated order of continuance, which basically is, or deferred, saying if you complete this and you're successful. So it's kind of a diversion program that I think could be used as an alternative for individuals that come in with controlled substance issues, but that is going to be at a higher cost to local municipalities that do codify these ordinances, because our probation rates are going to go up. And what we found is a lot of people aren't able to pay their fines and fees. We don't, we're not a collection agency for the state. We're here to try to rehabilitate people, make sure that they're somewhat accountable and try to get them help. But contrary to popular belief, the courts aren't collecting a lot of money from defendants that are arrested on criminal charges. That's just my take on it. Is there any other thoughts, questions, concerns?
Yeah, I'm going to add one more thing since you brought this up, how our courts will be handling these things. We're talking about maybe a significant increase of caseload in our district court, and I think that'll be the case, but I'm not sure. So it's kind of an awkward thing. Bill, maybe you can tell us what your thoughts are about officers getting involved in these types of cases, and maybe Donnell too. Do you think that this is going to be a situation where officers are out really enforcing this law a lot?
Well, from my perspective, I think we still get complaints from people, particularly using drugs in public, or people that are endangering others or having it in close proximity to others. I think that's probably where it's going to be. But to be honest with you, we're focused on violent crime right now with the trends that are going that we see in the county. But it's certainly a tool that's needed in the toolbox at times.
And I would also agree with the sheriff that it's going to really be a wait and see type of situation in terms of the response. So at this point, we really don't know. So we'll see in a few months.
Yeah, I think it's a little bit unique, and Chief Tanksley will see this, and Sheriff Elpo has seen this in the past when he worked for Blaine. But being right on the border, we get a lot of calls to the border for people in possession of drugs. So I've seen recently, since the border's open, we've had a little bit of an uptick in no contact border violations, people going across. And now that this has changed from a felony to non-existent to now back to an issue, there could be an increase just with border traffic alone of getting calls back to the port with people coming across with controlled substances.
And knowing a little bit about that with the CBP calling local law enforcement, they have the jurisdiction. They can prosecute those in federal courts if they so choose. And I don't think we should be taking on those. With our port of entry, we have several in the county, and I don't see us taking on that role, and particularly when small amounts of drugs. If that's a priority for the feds, then they should take care of it.
Thank you. Doug Chadwick?
I was just going to add that part of that legislation really encourages, obviously, the treatment piece of it. And, I can see from either our behavioral health deputies or just our patrol deputies trying to reemphasize the LEAD program as an option. And I know that's encouraged by the prosecutor's office as well. But also there's language in there about 1031-110 and using a crisis stabilization facility to, divert people and utilize that. So at the end of the day, that's going to really come down to capacity, which I think we're all in agreement that we're not there right now, but certainly we'll try and leverage those resources.
Thank you. Any other comments or concerns in reference to this bill? Wow, impressive. Dan, Mike, I believe we're on other business unless I'm missing something.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the last of Dan's comment there. Are we moving on to public comments?
I think you need to unmute, Dan.
This is really hard to do on a phone. Okay. Can you, Jill, next, can you put the agenda back up?
Yes, give me a moment.
Okay, so any other business before both of these committees from committee members from either legal and justice or behavioral health? Okay, I see no hands raised. And then we'll go on to public comment. And Jill, do you want to instruct folks that want to provide public comment how to do that?
Yes, thank you. We have a number of attendees today. If any of you would like to speak to the committees, please virtually raise your hand now. I do have one hand raised. Joy, go ahead and speak.
Thank you very much. I know many of you, some of you I don't know. I've been serving as the president of the Restorative Community Coalition for the last 13 years and recently was appointed to become the executive director. Over the last 13 years, I've been observing and working with, I was what do you call it? The second person behind Irene Morgan when she sat on the Incarceration Prevention Reduction Task Force. And I have deep, deep misgivings about the direction we're headed in the county right now. And part of that is because I was there on January 28th, 2021, when we all experienced the very, very big civic collision. It was civic violence at a level I've not been in any community in my life. Some of you may have been in stuff like that, but the emotional impact and the trauma of that event rippled out across this community in extraordinary ways. On April, I think it was 25th of this last year, I submitted a statement asking the Incarceration Prevention and Reduction Task Force and any of you to respond to my concerns and my input regarding the jail issues, regarding the movement to start building solutions to solve the criminal justice problems. And to my chagrin, not one of you answered my email. And I submitted a substantial amount of information, but what I've been studying since that time, because I realize you're all are busy and you're trying to do things according to the law. The problem is that we have a human problem and political solutions and criminal justice answers. Trauma is not a crime. We have, I mean, in the last few months, I've been studying and working with fentanyl addicted people, working with the homeless and working with all these people. And I don't know how many minutes I have here, and I'm probably over time already. But I want to say a couple of things. We need to start talking outside of the county jurisdiction. We are talking, yes, the county has jurisdiction over emergencies, but every single small city and every single other law enforcement jurisdiction is involved. And the task force that you have is not broad enough to be able to handle the nonprofits problems and the public problems. And we need to do that. We are missing a massive restorative justice opportunity to actually solve a problem that is a national problem. And we can solve it in Whatcom County if we just open our minds and our hearts and our willingness to talk to some of the people. The Restorative Community Coalition has never yet been allowed to speak at any of these events for more than 3 minutes. There are nonprofits in this town, people, mothers, grandmothers who are working with these children who are committing suicide. We had something like 7 young men in a short period of time in Whatcom County commit suicide and murder in this community. They're 45-year-old people, some of them with children. Why are they doing that? We're not addressing that. And that is what I believe we need to be talking about, because our civic systems have culpability, and it is a moral obligation and moral honesty. We say that at the front of this meeting. We claim it, but we're not giving ourselves true public honesty about the challenges we face. This is a human problem. We can't fix it just with the county. Eric, you're not enough to be able to solve all the problems. Sheriff Elfo, you're not enough either. None of us are enough alone. We need a community resolution, and I'm asking you, to give us a chance to bring the community honestly together across all the silos to discuss solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joy.
Thank you, Joy. If anyone else would like to speak to the committees, please virtually raise your hand now. And no hands are raised.
Thank you all for a robust discussion, and this meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.